House Speaker Paul Ryan is leading the Republican charge to take on that daunting task of passing tax reform. This evening, I spoke with Speaker Ryan in his office about it, but first we began with his reaction to yesterday's horrific shooting in Texas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for spending some time with us tonight.
Congratulations on the new gig.
Thank you so much. Another really difficult day for the country yesterday. The Texas church killer. Right. It turns out he was separated from the Air Force for bad conduct.
That's right.
Did a year in the brig, in prison, and then the Air Force never put his name on the instant background check. So he was able to buy 4 guns. What should happen as a result of this? And he was
convicted of domestic abuse.
Yeah, so, domestic abuse, child abuse. What should be done so that this never happens again?
So he wasn't supposed to get a gun in the first place because we have laws on the books that prevent people like that from getting guns. So that's what's frustrating about this is the laws are there on the books, but you got to execute the law. You got to follow through the law. You got to apply the law.
Should there be consequences to the Air Force?
Well, yeah. So that's what the Air Force is doing, a quick scramble. And what the heck just happened? What went wrong? And there are other
like
people
26
that have
people dead because someone didn't put them in the
right. So the law is on the books to prevent a person like this from getting a gun. And that didn't happen, and we've got to get to the bottom of why that did not happen. And yes, there are a lot of questions the Air Force has to answer on that.
Should anyone who ever is separated from the military with a dishonorable or bad conduct discharge, regardless of whether they do time or not, should they be able to buy a firearm?
Well, there are dishonorable discharges, and there are just other kinds of discharges. Yeah. So I think you got to be careful.
Or bad conduct.
You got to be careful what that means. And so, but this was domestic abuse. So we have laws in the books that people convicted of domestic abuse can't buy a gun.
Yeah, if this happened,
so this is pretty clear-cut case.
The result of all of this is, of course, in social media, people are always going crazy. People are saying horrible things, frankly. You sent out a tweet calling for the prayers, which many of us did. The reaction in the celebrity world to your call for prayers from Michael McKeon, Will Wheaton, others, basically saying, essentially, this is the Republicans' fault, and they were praying. And maybe it's time to do something other than pray, Speaker Ryan. Blaming the GOP.
It's disappointing. It's sad. And this is what you'll get from the far secular left. People who do not have faith don't understand faith, I guess I'd have to say. And it is the right thing to do is to pray in moments like this because, look, prayer works. And I know you believe that and I believe that. And when you hear the secular left doing this thing, no wonder you've got so much polarization and disunity in this country when people think like that.
It turns out the man who was the hero in this was an NRA member and knew how to use a weapon and probably saved the lives of many others. The criticism from Schumer, Pelosi, et cetera, is Republicans are bought and paid for by the NRA. And that's why we'll never ban bump stocks or AR assault type weapons. You say?
Well, look, the bump stock issue, the Judiciary Committee is working with the ATF on that alone, that issue. But do we believe in the Constitution and the Second Amendment rights? Of course we do. So if you're trying to exploit a tragedy to try and infringe on a law-abiding citizen's Second Amendment rights, no, we don't want to do that. But if there's a problem where a person who should not have gotten a gun because they're a domestic abuser, that's something that you've got to make sure that the authorities do their jobs. We have laws in the books for a reason. We need to enforce those laws. We just passed comprehensive mental illness reform, which we think helps get the root cause. But if you want to use a tragedy to try and take away a law-abiding citizen's Second Amendment rights, that's a totally different question altogether.
Let's talk about the tax bill. It's interesting that both on the left and the right, you guys have sustained some pretty big criticisms. The Wall Street Journal at one point, I think it was on the weekend edition, said that this bubble bracket results in tax brackets that are upwards of almost 50%, and that this will ultimately pave the way for even higher brackets. Why did we elect Republicans? Is this Hillary Clinton in office?
We're not for higher brackets. Everyone enjoys a tax cut all across the board. What this quote-unquote bubble rate does is just says the millionaires don't get the tax cut that is aimed for low and middle-class people, the people in the 12% bracket. So all it is it's saying we want to preserve middle-class tax cuts for middle class. But a person in the top bracket still gets
1.2 to 1.6 million?
1.1 to 1.2 or something like that.
For couples filing together jointly?
But they still get lower taxes. So that's the point. So, look, we don't like high tax rates either, but what we're trying to do is make all of this work, getting taxes down on businesses, for jobs, for leveling the playing field. But the goal of the tax cut is to aim it toward the middle class, and that's what that's all about.
The upper income is not getting a tax cut in this, really. I mean, unless you have like a pass-through
they're not getting a tax
corporation,
rate cut.
You're not
getting
a
tax rate cut. Yeah, the president was really clear with us about this. He said, I don't want the top millionaires getting a big rate cut. I want that to go to the middle class. And
but
so we structured a bill to do that.
But isn't that buying into the class warfare mentality? In your Better Way plan, you had a border adjustment tax that would have raised a lot of revenue and allowed for true simplification and true reform. And who was the person who stopped the border adjustment tax, which was criticized as a VAT tax, but which most countries have? Who stopped that?
I'd say it was the retailers, the retail industry.
Yeah.
We just couldn't get consensus on it. We believe that was the smartest thing to do. I'm a big fan of that. I think it's a smart thing to do to put American businesses on a level playing field with the rest of the world. And it would have gotten us $1 trillion to cut taxes across the board. But that's behind us. We now have consensus. This is the tax cut is an average of $1,182 for the average household in America. That's who this is aimed toward. It's about giving break to the middle class and the people who are living paycheck to paycheck, and then leveling the playing field for American businesses so that they can have higher jobs. Look, at the Tax Foundation just told us this thing's going to create almost 1 million new jobs. It's going to give us more growth, higher wages.
Why'd you change it today? Why did Brady adjust the 2023?
That's just the typical. That's a manager's amendment. He put a bill out there. He got feedback. He applied some of that feedback to the bill. That's part and parcel for the legislative process.
Is there going to retroactivity, though? There's an issue with the retroactivity of these?
They're looking at all sorts of different things, and it's about making the numbers work and getting the best policy possible and taking feedback from our colleagues about how to improve the bill as best we can.
Do you think rates are too high in the United States?
Of course I do.
Where should they be for everybody?
Oh, look, I'm an old flat taxer. I'm an old Jack Kemp, Steve Forbes flat tax guy. So that bill.
I think it's obscene that any individual can spend this much time working this hard as they do, and they're paying 46% in a certain income bracket. To me, that's just like, why are Republicans in charge?
But we're still lowering people's taxes. But look at this. We are so dramatically simplifying the tax system. 90% of Americans would get to use this. 9 out of 10 Americans, because of the dramatic overhaul and simplification, getting rid of loopholes, getting rid of carve-outs, and just cutting people's taxes.
If the Senate agrees. That's the big
issue. Well, yeah, a bill's got to pass the House and the Senate.
Speaker Ryan, this is what happened with Obamacare repeal. You actually moved Obamacare
and we passed
repeal.
That bill.
You got it through, and it died in the Senate because you have two people, at least, Senator McCain and Senator Flake, who I believe do not want Donald Trump to be a successful president. That's my belief. You have one more person who votes against it, maybe it's Langford, and you got no tax reform. How concerned are you that for all this work you guys have been doing, some people still don't like it, but you did something, goes over to the Senate and dies? How worried are you?
I should have brought my other chart in my pocket. We've passed more bills here in the House in the first 10 months of the Trump administration than in Obama, Clinton, and both Bushes.
But what are you going to say to McConnell?
So,
they're in work. They work for 3 days a week.
Look, I'm not going to get into their schedule, but here's the deal: this bill cannot be filibustered. The way we wrote this bill, that's the bubble rate and things like that, are because we had to follow the Senate rules, so that this thing cannot be filibustered. And here's what we did differently than health care. We agreed ahead of time what this would look like. We, meaning the House, the Senate, and the President, agreed ahead of time what this thing would look like, what this tax relief would look like, middle-class tax cuts.
How about Flake and McCain? What are they going to do?
They're all part of this discussion.
They are? Okay.
And that's why it's really important that we deliver this for the American people, for the American economy. But more importantly, the fact that we agreed ahead of time what this would look like gives me great optimism that we're going to get this done.
Congressional approval is about 22%, even lower than President Trump is, depending on which poll you look at, about 37%. Why is congressional approval this low?
Because we haven't gotten these things in law yet.
Yeah.
So like I said, I can walk you through about 285 bills we passed in the House that are still kind of going through the system. But people want to see differences made. People want to see it get done. They want to see bills on President Trump's desk.
They want to see their lives get better, don't they?
Yeah, that's my point. That's the final point I was going to say is the reason we push for these bills is to improve people's lives, to show that there's a big difference for having this unified Republican government. That's why we see ourselves as the engine room of government in Congress. We're working here, getting these things done, pushing them, but we got to get them over the finish line so that people can see a real difference.
The Bushes, over the last 10 days, in different ways, have attacked Donald Trump. George H.W. called him a blowhard. George W. Said, basically didn't like him, didn't know him, gave a speech, veiled attacks on Trump. Do you think that's helpful for the entire Bush family to be
I don't-
leveling these attacks
I don't
on
think
the
it's
current
helpful for any
president?
Republicans to go after each other. I think we should stay unified. I think we have common principles and common beliefs and priorities that we all agree on. So let's go focus on that and get things done. I see a president who's a risk taker, who's willing to lean out there and get things done. He wants things done yesterday. I think that's good. It shakes up our system a little bit around here.
Well, why are the Bushes so upset?
I have no clue. I haven't talked to him.
That's not a theory. You've been around for 2
Yeah,
decades
but I haven't
here.
talked to him about why they're so upset. I
Is
didn't-
Bush Republicanism the wave of the future, or is it more of a populist conservatism that's growing across the country?
Get things done, prove our principles work, improve people's lives. That's the kind of republicanism that should unify everybody. It's results republicanism, results conservatism. That's what I care about, and that's what we're focused on doing.
How's your personal relationship with the president?
Very good. Very good. We talk all the time. I mean, he's in Asia now, so we're not talking, but we talk quite often.
Can you
Probably
pick up
every
the
other
phone
day.
and call him any
all the
day?
time. I can call him
Anytime?
anytime.
Do you ever tell him not to tweet?
He called me out of a tree stand on Saturday morning last week. So,
Oh, you're hunting?
Oh, yeah, I'm a big bow hunter. But yeah, we talk all the time.
And
We talk about everything. We talk about policy. We talk about families. We talk about our kids. We talk about everything.
Speaker Ryan, we really appreciate you taking some time.
You bet.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Laura.
much. Thanks for
Congratulations.
joining us.